Buenos dias, Senora. May I take a moment of your time?
Oh, yes, of course.
Miss Guzman, is it? May I ask you a few questions about an event that happened here around 20 years ago, concerning the death of one of the townspeople, Santiago Nazar?
Yeah, what about him?
Would you mind telling me, giving me some insight to the events that pertain to his murder? Maybe a bit about him as a person.
That boy, he was just like his father, a shit. His father had seduced me at a young age when my heart was not fully developed into knowing the full extent of a man. When his affection for me ran out, so did my usefulness for him. I once transformed who was a lover and turned into simply just a cook in his household. And now, his son attempts to do the same to my daughter.
Do you remember the day leading up to his murder?
I remember it as if it were yesterday. The boys simply brought out the worst in me. I would disembowel the rabbits that I would buy from the local butcher shop and feed the entrails to the dogs, just to upset him as he ate his breakfast. Thinking back to that moment, I always thought it strange how a man who was so accustomed to killing defenseless animals could think me a savage for doing the same.
Could you tell me a little bit about the ones who committed the crime?
No one thought anything of the Vicario boys going to kill Santiago. Their reputation as good people were so well-founded that no one paid attention to them, and many even thought that their liquor had caught up to their heads. Simply drunkards baloney.
May I have a moment of your time, Father?
Yes. May I ask who this is for?
I have a few questions to ask regarding the murder of Santiago Nazar.
Santiago, yes. I remember. How long ago was that?
Do you remember anything about the murder?
Well, if my memory permits, I recall the whole town was in a riot over the arrival of the bishop. Everyone had been excited for weeks, and when he came that early morning, I saw all the townspeople crowd towards the dock to receive the bishop. He was sitting atop his steamship, waving and whatnot towards the crowds. Dios mío, I saw people handing away roosters and other gifts to the bishop. And as for Santiago, that poor man, it was said he was going to die that day.
When was the last time you saw Santiago? Do you remember what he was like at all?
Yes, I recall that time. Unfortunately, when I did see him, he was cold and quite pale, you see. When I did see him, Santiago had already been murdered by them. He was stretched out before me. I saw him on a table in our public school. I was the one who had to perform the autopsy, along with the druggist too. The mayor ordered us to do it. I don't know why. We had a few tools to operate from. However, his body had already been carved up by the twins, so it's not like any damage was done. There was something I will never forget when I saw that body though. His body had 7 wounds, and on his hands it looked as if there were the stigma, like from Christ.
When you mention they, you mean the Vicario brothers. What was your relationship with them?
Yes, the Vicario brothers. They were nice kids and good Christians. We all thought they were harmless. I remember when they had killed him, they ran towards the church and they came before me. They came before me and claimed they killed Santiago Nazar. And they told me like how God permitted the murder of this man, Santiago.
Oh, how are you feeling today?
Oh, I don't know. Better. If I know what you're talking about. I'm not guilty, you know.
Well, what are you talking about?
Santiago, right? Yeah, it was my duty. We killed him openly, but we're innocent.
Really? Do you want to talk about it?
Well, I mean, what is there to talk about?
Do you want to tell us about it?
I did it for my sister. Each stab was justified and righteous. 7 of the many wounds were fatal. The liver was almost sliced to pieces by 2 deep cuts on the anterior side. He had 4 incisions on his stomach, one of them so deep that it went all the way through and destroyed the transverse colon, and multiple wounds in the small intestine. The only one he had in the back, at the level of the 3rd lumbar vertebra, had perforated the right kidney. The abdominal cavity was filled with large clots of blood. Need more detail?
Sounds like it hurt.
We made damn sure he suffered for his sins.
Hola, cousin. It has been a long time.
Yes, I suppose it has. I've heard you've been running around the town asking about the death of Santiago Nazar.
Perhaps I have. What of it?
Is this why you've come to see me after so many years have passed without a word from you?
I need answers, Angela. Why did you accuse Santiago Nazar? Were you protecting someone?
Don't beat it to death, cousin. He was the one.
But why did you feel compelled to tell Bayardo?
Well, that's not what I originally intended. My friends had instructed me to go to my husband, get him drunk in bed until he passed out, and to feign embarrassment more than I had really felt so that he would turn out the light. I didn't do any of that because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it was all something dirty that shouldn't be done to anybody, much less the poor man who had the bad luck to marry me. That was when I realized that it was very easy because I had made up my mind to die.
But what happened when you returned home?
Well, my mother was the only one who had awakened, and when I arrived home, she beat me severely. When Mama began to hit me, I began to remember him. The blows hurt less because I knew they were for him. After my mother had beat me, I began to sob, but not because of the blows, because of him. I kept on thinking about him while my mother put arnica compresses on my face, and even more when I heard something shouting in the street and the fire alarm bells in the belfry.
Hello, Senor Bedoya. I hope you are comfortable in sharing these details.
I feel maybe that it is time that the world finds out how violent the murder of my best friend Santiago was. It was brutal.
I see. So, I understand you were close to Santiago.
Indeed I was, and still would be willing to go to any means to defend him, as he was like a brother to me.
Did you take any defensive measures when you heard of the threat on Santiago's life?
Yes. With his own weapon, as a matter of fact.
You were a good friend, I can tell.
Of course. I even was a major part in performing his autopsy. It was not pleasant, to say the least.
Would you mind telling your side of the story?
The Vicario brothers were relentless. It was to the point where I had to put his intestines back in place and wrapped his body in linen strips. It wasn't the most effective, as in the afternoon a syrup-colored liquid began to flow from the wounds, drawing flies, and a purple blotch appeared on his upper lip.
That sounds horrifying.
Imagine putting your best friend together and then watching his corpse rot. It was not an amusing day, and the days, weeks, months that followed carry his almost dreadful scent seemingly everywhere.
Go.
Señora Dinero, is it? ¿Cómo estás?
Sí, I've been better, to say the least.
If you were able to, may I ask a few questions about your son?
Oh, mi hijo, Santiago, such a good boy, so much like his father. It's my fault. My fault he's gone now. I gave him the wrong interpretation.
Forgive me for bringing up such a sensitive topic, Señora, but I must ask, is there anything you remember from the day he was murdered?
See, there were so many things going through my mind at that time. The time of my son's passing. All I could think of after the events was why it had to be him. My son may have had his dealings with many of the women in the village, but by no means did the Vicario boys need to go out and kill him.
Can you tell me a little bit about your son?
Just like his father, he was taught how to hunt. In the closet, I remember he kept so many guns. I don't even know how to pronounce all of them. I always knew that he kept the guns in one place and the ammunition in the other, just so it's removed so that if anyone would not be tempted into loading them.
Do you remember seeing him before he died?
I remember seeing him. intestines spilling out, trying to rise above the ground from his own precious blood. My child, his head was spinning with hallucinations. He didn't know what was going on after those Makara boys had cut up my son, the little shits. Santiago Nazar.
Perhaps I have. What of it?
Is this why you've come to see me after so many years have passed without a word from you?
I need answers. God.
As if it were yesterday. The boys simply brought out the worst in me. I was... David, you have to move it down.
Sorry.
And Rachel, can you like go a little this way so it's not like I'm just like staring at something else?
I thought I was going... Jesus.
Shut up! Okay, alright.
I can't read it.
Hello, Senor Bedoya. I hope you are comfortable in sharing these details.
Restart. The world finds out that the violent... I didn't change my voice. And still would be going to...
Are you ready?